Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this stream called From Event Streams to AI Agents, Building Real-Time Gen AI Systems. My name is Catherine Edelweiss. I'm a developer advocate at Bellsoft. And today for the stream, I am joined by a very, very special person whose regalia will not fit the screen if I am to show it all.
Oh,
So I'll just give you a couple of words as an introduction, and then we'll dig straight into the topic. So I'm joined today by Mary Grygleski. She's the member of the Leadership Council at the AI Collective and Java Champion. She knows event-driven architecture inside and out, and she's also on the first name terms with Gen AI. Hello, Mary. Welcome.
hello, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Mary, on your LinkedIn page, you say that you are passionate about working on progressive software technologies to serve and better humanity. Mary, what serving and bettering humanity means to you in terms of software?
Sure. Yeah, that's actually a great question. I think, let's put it that way, right? We know, and I really like working with technology. I think that's how I got in because I was fascinated, and it's like to me, right? We can do so many, infinite possibility of using it to do something to help, to make processes more efficient, and kind of a lot of mundane kind of things we can use technology to help us. But I think also too now with AI, we know it is everywhere, right? And so much so that sometimes we maybe even forgot, right? That okay, AI, what is it for? So to me, I think I like to think of it. What I'm doing is going to make people better, and not just, I suppose, not just with the processing side, but we really, with AI, kind of forces us to also think of all the other kind of concerns that we never kind of knew or aware of until I think AI came out. For example, we use all the data to train models and such, and then also too, then new concerns coming out. Well, of course, AI isn't new too. Even before ChatGPT, before GenAI, there's already talk about AI bias because the data we use for training can make the results of your all of the LLM searching, whatever, even like old models, it can make the results kind of have kind of not a fair assessment not on things because you may not be using the proper data to train. You ask the question and it gives you whatever it knows at the time. Same thing now with LLM. So what I'm kind of bringing this up is that I like the fact that we have all these problems and forces us to think about, what it is that that helps, with people. Ultimately, it is humans, and we are the ones that should be benefiting from it, not for greedy purposes. It's really for, better things. And now looking at, even like world peace, can we kind of use it, for towards that end, responsible AI, ethics, all of these things. And, possibilities are many, but we also are being, kind of basically have the responsibility to use it for good, and maybe like even now with the way things are going, there are people with problems, with their physical limitations. For example, maybe some handicap situation, you can use maybe vision, help people to read, be able to see things better, hear things better. And like I said, with even the peace part, and also with environment, which some things I saw too, in which people use technology to clean up the ocean, things like that. So those are the kind of things, right? Not to take jobs away from people, but really make people's lives better. It is what I feel it ought to be. So yeah, that's what excites me. So yeah.
Thank you. That is a very beautiful start to our conversation, Mary. Thank you so much. That's very inspiring, and we are going to discuss today how Gen AI coupled with event-driven systems can actually help us ship better software, more progressive, right, and more even useful than it was before. So, friends, before we begin, Again, thank you for joining us. Say hi in the chat. Don't be afraid. Say where you're joining us from. We are very curious. So, for example, I am based in Almaty, and Mary, you are currently in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm based in Chicago. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. So just drop a line where you're joining us from, and if you have any questions related to software, to Gen AI, to event-driven systems, wherever, right? Just drop them into the comments, and me and Mary will be very happy to answer them. Right. Mayuri, hi. Hi.
hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know where you're from too. I'm so like fascinated. I did not, like I said before, it was only now I knew Catherine is based in Europe, but I somehow didn't know you were in Almaty. I'm like, well, wow, that's a long way from me. But it's exciting, like a place which I've never visited, but I just love it. So I like to know where everybody is from. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating. So
Oh, yes. And I love these streams because people are joining from all over the world, right? And
yeah.
it's so cool. I mean, to get people to know from different countries. And maybe we have the Almaty jog. And so we were talking with Mary before the stream that she maybe one day,
Oh, I love to.
fingers crossed, yeah, comes to Almaty. Hello,
Okay. Yeah.
Mustafa,
Oh,
joining
wow,
us
from
in
Iraq.
Brighton. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank
Cool,
you.
amazing. Very beautiful country.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Wonderful.
All right. So, let's dig into it. Yeah? So, Mary, let's define first what are event-driven systems for our audience who may be just starting their journey into in the streaming or event-based architecture.
Sure. So I think, for event driven, it's definitely not like what we think of a traditional way of doing processing, right? And so a lot of things these days, even when we first learn to write code, we are kind of more thinking of doing things that are less of not even like real time, so to speak, but because let's just think of it, right? We are going to need something, the computer, machine to process the task or things that we needed to do. So we send the instruction, like, so now in Gen AI world is sending the prompt, that's what the input, what I want, describing. And usually too, well, the old ways of doing things is always you just construct your command. And the old ways too would be you have to strictly abide by the rules and everything. But of course now with Gen AI, you can talk to, through vibe coding, through voice, through spoken languages, you can provide your input that way. And so what I'm trying to say is that, we are kind of, maybe our minds are more trained to think of, okay, I need something, so let me send the command over and then wait for it to process, and then the results will come back kind of while we're waiting, right? But we need to wait, that's the thing. Now with event driven, the way it works is more asynchronous. So in other words, it's a different kind of mindset. It's like you're trying to break up the data, and you, like, data can be carrying the commands, you can send it at any time, and the receiving end is also working at its own pace too. So, and also too, in that case, your command can come in as a queue, a form of a queue, or kind of
Mhm.
a pops up type of situation. Then there's no need for you to be, waiting too. You send the command over, and then in the meantime, you're doing something else. So it's almost seems like, like going, I think if I use some kind of non-technical kind of example for maybe folks who may not be technical in the audience, I don't know, but it's just assuming so, then it's like you going to a supermarket. There are long lines of people waiting to get cold cuts. And so rather than waiting and giving the command like that, you take a ticket, and you take a ticket and go do something else and come back. Or maybe in some cases, it just displayed a number. And then when it's your number, then it's your turn to do things. So in a sense, right, in a very crude way, is what it is. Like event is more like it frees you up. That's kind of like the benefit of it. It frees you up. You don't need to wait, to kind of in perfect synchrony to work with whatever
Mhm.
you need to get services from, so to speak. I
Mhm.
hope I'm explaining it well. I sort of think of in terms of system, and maybe, in using that example, maybe it helps too. So in some sense, event driven is essentially, whatever action will happen based on events. It's think of it like in computing sense, it's like signals, right? And if you think of all of the signals that are traveling, certain signals come, then you do something. So that's kind of essentially the how I would describe like it's event driven in that sense. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hi, Johannes. Hi. uh, cool. Nice to see you. Hi. Event-driven system is not something like very, very specific, right? Any basic application can benefit from events, like banking system, for example, a banking application,
Yes.
or
That,
e-commerce, right, or IoT.
that
So,
yes.
if we take these applications, right, for example, a banking application that uses event streaming,
Yeah.
how can it benefit from using AI? Or if we put it another way,
Mm.
what do we mean when we say Gen AI coupled with event streaming? It's not just AI plus Kafka, right? It's something bigger, right? Something architectural shift.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's what it is. It's actually a very excellent question because I was just also yesterday happens to be in Chicago, and there are various meetups and things like that. I was talking to someone, and that person is actually doing blockchain. And of course, they talk about smart contracts. Now, for me, I have to admit right away when they say smart contracts, I said, "What is that?" I feel like all of a sudden I'm like a young person, like a young kid again. What is that? Because to them, the person and his friend too, they were very knowledgeable about smart contract and all that. And initially, even I got a bit confused when we brought up like event streaming. They said, "Oh no, it won't work." But then the more we thought about it, we went into some more conversations, and it's actually, to me, event streaming is a bit dealing with the lower level of processing, right?
Mhm.
We're now dealing with messaging, and messaging raw message, though not like very low level. I kind of also kind of refer this to the OSI, if we know, right? Open system interconnect, that OSI layer. So to me, it's just a different layer of processing that we are referring to. So we're dealing with event streaming. These are more dealing with the messaging, not the lowest ethernet physical layer, but maybe more transport. I guess it's maybe about that, right? Even ethernet, what is it, ethernet physical? I used to study that, right? So OSI. So
Mhm.
anyway, it's very middle transport about that. And so yeah, let me make sure I answer your question correctly too. So you were asking about can you repeat your question again so then I don't deviate too much?
Of course, of course. So, what when we say Gen AI coupled with event streaming? So, what do we mean by that? It's not
Yeah,
just AI plus Kafka, right? It's
that's
the
right.
architectural shift, right?
Okay.
So, what does it mean, Gen AI plus event streaming?
Yeah, the generous that, yeah, exactly. So okay, so I'll go back to that. So I think in some ways, right, I look at it like Gen AI, we are now dealing more with a higher level. It's an application that does things and that works with LLM, and it's slightly different. I don't know if the OSI actually has been altered because of AI, but in any event, I do believe it's probably still the seven layers fundamentally. So anyway, so what I'm kind of thinking is, AI and then with event streaming is basically events dealing with the lower level and Gen AI is higher level. So in other words, we are looking at architectural level. We can actually looking at Gen AI. It's the same thing. We need to send prompts, and maybe like prompts, you don't need to wait. It's more like you can send it. Maybe the prompts can be sent as a Kafka message too. I'm just using Kafka as an example, but it can be any message broker, right? That it can be sent, the prompt can be sent as a message, and it just sent anytime, and it's event driven. The processor doesn't need to wait, until, for something else while waiting. It just you send your messages and it comes as it comes, and I process when I can on the other side, kind of like that. So perfect, kind of going back to your question, yes, it will be, in my thinking, is that is architectural design. And so the questions becomes differently. It's not like they don't really plug in together. So back to my thing, I know is that I'm having so much thoughts because based on the
Mhm.
discussion I have yesterday with the people randomly at the meetup, I think initially said, "Oh, it's not the same thing." Blockchain, again, blockchain is a higher level type of thing, but it makes use of ledger. From what I now know, smart contracts, and they were showing me something. So I think yes, it can still be using event streaming. Anything can be using event streaming, that technique on the lower level to enable that asynchronous style of messaging to
Mhm,
happen.
mhm,
So that's what I'm kind of looking at. So yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
So, do I understand you correctly that AI now doesn't work with static data, but gets fresh data in real time and processes fresh data in real time?
Yes, exactly. I think that's what I'm also trying to refer to, especially, right? For example, if you're already working with GenAI, the techniques retrieval augmented generation, as we all, yeah, I guess if anybody in the audience is familiar with RAG, right? RAG, it's kind of a perfect example in some sense. You can be leveraging event streaming to do, they're providing this missing data that LLM doesn't have, right? Essentially, you can be using Kafka topic to feed in real-time data into your processing in a prompt, and that your AI app can enhance the prompt by using these extra data that it gets in real time, and plug it in and sends it over to the LLM. So yes, that's correct. Yeah, so what you
Mhm,
were saying, yeah.
mhm. So, for example, let's take the banking application. It uses event streams, right? Because it has to process huge amounts of data
Yeah.
in real time, right?
Mhm.
And we want to integrate GenAI into this whole application as the separate layer, right?
Yeah.
The top layer. So,
Yeah.
what changes for this application or for users of this application, for example?
A
Let's go
user.
to the user side. So, what
Oh,
changes for the users?
for the user. Okay, that's a very good. I think maybe, yeah, from the user, I suppose, your banking application can now be using prompts.
Mhm,
That's a Gen AI, which is like voice prompts now. What used to be, you need to maybe follow a set way of entering your request, and now the request can be spoken, right? Or in spoken form, type in as text as well, or as audio. So that will be one thing. So more like the input, the user interface is changed in that sense. And then what other thing? And of course, too, in I suppose in real life banking applications, it may not be extensively used, yet, right? From what my understanding, because banking, well, because of the thing with AI, that's another issue. AI being hallucination because of its non-deterministic kind of
mhm,
nature of their algorithms. But anyway, but for the sake of this discussion, is that what other things change, right? So assuming is
mhm.
in a banking situation, it's fine. You can use, Gen AI kind of techniques, but maybe behind closed door, not exposing
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
outside. You can be using local LLMs. So in that case, I think there can also be, I talk about the user interface part that comes in prompts.
Mhm.
Everything input is in the forms of prompts now, and then gets sent over to your application. Could be another like RAG application, because
Mhm.
RAG again, will be techniques that are being used, and of course you can also enhance it using agents as well that's carry the RAG too. And I think in that particular case, then the apps too, maybe you are doing certain things to do some searching. Although strictly speaking, for LLM, it's not really doing search, right? Not the traditional search, it's doing pattern matching. But the thing is too, and bear in mind, it's non-deterministic. So you could be asking the same question in the same exact prompt many times, and maybe results come back slightly different. And that would be the thing we need to work with. But other than that, you could then use a RAG application and get all the prompts, and then RAG will then inquire about a vector database to get additional information to augment what LLM doesn't have, and then use the results from your vector database, let's say, to enhance your prompt, and then
Mhm.
go back again and ask the LLM, and LLM will then do a better job, supposedly, right, with more added information, the context a little bit more accurate, will come back with more accurate answer. So I think that's what will be changed. It will
Mhm.
definitely be changed in this way. But again, we need to also think of the fact that the results may not be exact. It's not precise, every time. So that might also be, an issue we need to be dealing with too, in that sense. And not to say, right, there are also security issues and their data. But again, we're just using hypothetical situation that we're doing this all behind the firewall. So maybe it's
Mhm.
less of a big concern. But then with any kind of I think with agents, especially if you're going to also bring in agents to handle some of these things, and how much authority, access do you give to what kind of agents as well. So I think that also is another level that I guess the whole industry is still trying to figure out what to do. There are various forms now of enhanced security, maybe MCP server security. There are also post-quantum security, for example. Which I'm still kind of studying, not quite exactly, but I think definitely there will be security level as well in a banking situation. So yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing that you brought up about the usage, and that not all companies are adopting AI. And there was the Enterprise AI report of 2026 by Deloitte, and
Yeah.
this report gathered some statistics, and it says that agentic AI usage is expected to rise, right? But only 1 in 5 companies has a mature governance model for autonomous AI agents.
Yeah.
So the problem that you brought up is very, very interesting, and it's very, very acute
Yeah.
about the governance and how much of the autonomy AI agents should get. And that is my next question. Mary, what do you think? What governance practices are key, are the most essential before allowing AI agents to affect production workflows?
Oh, yeah, that's another excellent question. I think definitely, yes. There are governance. There also should be, right, especially in enterprise type of operational environment. It's definitely there's got to be task force or whatever, whoever an entity kind of have to govern, and it's kind of giving, for example, like I think the most basic also is, now we're going to use automated agents to do things, and so there's got to be some kind of framework to say, can an agent access certain data, what data gets sent in, all these I think needs to be clearly defined too, right? And again, this particular governing body inside an organization will have to make sure that these, kind of you have to start to set some guidelines, policies within an organizations, who can do certain things, who can have viewing, what kind of access permission. It's just like same thing like we always been doing. We need access control list, but there's got to be some way of handling it for when it's being handled by agents, because as such agents, the pure definition is I'm going to, have agents act on behalf of another person. So we have to make sure the agents has the proper kind of the permission to do things, right? So these are like all the governance within any kind of organization needs to oversee that too. But that's also kind of only one things, right? And because it's confusing, I think in a lot of companies and what to do, all of these things. So I feel there are lots of questions will pop up, right? Any kind of organization will need to kind of step through what are the kind of data, how much can be exposed, and how much can agents, and even like there could be different types of agents too, because as such, by definition, agents each are responsible for certain parts of your data flowing through a system, who can see such thing at certain time, and and in that particular stage of processing. So it can get into very minute kind of details that any kind of governing body will need to properly define it accordingly to that particular organization that's handling and dealing with the data. So and who can it be sent to, and things like that too. So yeah, and I think the discussion is never ending, and it still needs to be talked about and properly defined it, and that's how I look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Security is the super important topic, right? Especially with AI agents, and maybe even more acute for event-driven systems that use Gen AI. What do you think? Is the security even a bigger problem in this case if we integrate AI into event-driven systems?
Yes, I would think so too. I mean, likewise, right? If we're going to have event driven, like an event driven kind of techniques to be implementing multiple agents doing different things and agents between agents, let's say, and also again, with definition of having multiple agents, you are supposed to have agents becoming self like the autonomous too. So it's supposed to do things on its own or rely on some level of intelligence. But right now there isn't really true AGI yet, we know. But still, there are certain ways that you can be through coding or somehow you can also have agents able to make certain decisions. So that type of stuff. And do we want to actually allow an agent to give permission to another agent, right? Things like that, and how much stuff, right? Do we still need to plug in the human in the loop to say, okay, this agent can really audit it to make sure it can actually do what it's going to do, that type of stuff. So I think, again, it gets into a lot of these detail. And also then again, going back to, doing agents, especially multiple agents, and you have agents to agents communication, all of these things. It again depends on the type of system and applications you're dealing with. You have to really think through a lot of these details. And I'm sure maybe at some point when it becomes more clear, or as a human race, as in this computing field, we become more kind of, how can I say, we're all working on it. We're learning as we go, and we're gaining experience. I'm sure maybe after this initial hump, maybe we'll figure it out. Oh, there's a new way, a pattern of handling this type of concern. So once we figure out the pattern, it may become commoditized, essentially, not a big deal anymore. We have this framework that's built to handle this kind of new way of pattern of handling things. But until then, I think right now it's like the problem to solve right now. So that is what I'm looking at. But there's certainly, it's for multi-agentic too, will require more thinking. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
in this case, let's just stay on that for a bit, and let's look into the crystal ball, right?
Mm,
Purely hypothetically. So,
yeah.
what do you think? What exactly should change, right, in what we have now for agents to actually move from isolated pilots into reliable, event-driven production workflows? Purely
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Yeah. I think how can it okay, so let me kind of understand your question again. So it's basically currently, I suppose we're all looking at, okay, plenty of agents out there. A lot of agents too could be more, so to speak, a consumer level. Oh, I like to make sure, I write an open claw thing. A lot of people are doing open claw now, and or or at one point, right, like 2 months ago, it was a big thing. And people can easily, well, but that opens up your system to total vulnerability too, as we all know. And anyway, so it is very true. Right now, the way, you can kind of set things up. Oh, I don't want to do it. So I set up like a cron job, essentially, have my, agent go through every morning before I get up. It takes all of my, because, I'm sure everybody has multiple email inboxes, my social media, texting, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, right? You get all these messages. So I don't want to go through them one by one. So let me have an agent to go through, gather, and summarize for me what's more important, what is work related, what is fun related, what is family related, those things, right? So I'm sure, I mean, they are complicated in itself, but still, you could use maybe one agent to sort of cut across all your social media thing to do it. Now, the thing is, you're asking the question is to go to the next step, right? So
Mhm.
these are like beyond just your personal thing. It's going
Yeah.
to be an enterprise organization. I'm
Mhm.
going to be dealing with expense reimbursement and enabling it, within your company. So it is, again, I think our earlier the first few questions sort of touch on those kind of concern for enterprise
Yeah.
level that is dealing, beyond the personal thing, and kind of dealing with the company and company to company. Sometimes you could be, having data that you are reading, maybe a company. Well, how can I say, enterprise company? I can have partnership, right, and dealing with different things. So I'm like integrating or interacting with other systems, and I want to make sure, okay, there are agents going out to do things for me, acting on my behalf. Let's say I'm a shipping company. I want to make sure I go to the or shipping, and so my customers can come to me and they want to ship something, and I have tons of customers too, and I want to make sure all of the agents are handling everybody correctly, that type of stuff. So I can set up different agents for doing, for customer A or customer B. I'm just using this, kind of hypothetical. And that type of level of work, it's not going to be easy. And then again, I'm now dealing with multiple customers of different customer type. And there are also, not only that, right? There are also different policies. Maybe I have this customer has been like a long-term customer. I have certain discount, all these things, right? I'm just citing examples. So all these like business kind of variations is going to complicate things kind of hard. Now, the thing is though, how can we go from a kind of simpler situation to more serious kind of thing? I think it just will take time, but I kind of feel let's not be let's be setting ambitious goals, but let's take steps at one step at a time. Do something smaller that's more reachable. And like, let's say I'm going to, kind of go into an initial phase in which I'm going to interact only with handling this type of customer. So they may be a smaller subset, and do a like a prototype, right? To kind of prove a proof of concept, and kind of work through kind of doing it step by step. I think will be much better than, kind of trying to reach your final goal right away. But kind of set ambitious goal, but do them in like a step by step, increasing in complexity, and also taking account into many aspects of designing a system. But again, go from, really, it kind of requires any organization, especially technology, kind of business technology, sit down and look at all your problems, and kind of prioritize what can be done first, and then go with the easiest first, and then proof of concept, and look at the results and feedback and measure too. Is it helping the organization? Is this worth it, right? And of course, don't forget too, LLMs are actually very expensive, and we didn't think of it. It's kind of fun, but they're using a lot of energy from GPUs, the data center and all these things. So we have to measure kind of, is it worth it, right? Not everything requires AI, let's say. Not everything requires multi-agent. But the thing is, we can always do these initial steps to kind of prove it, and then, iteratively kind of figure it out, what your next step might be. I think that's what I would suggest, to do. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. And again, staying on the topic of systems, you mentioned correctly, right? I agree that not everything requires AI, really.
Yeah.
That would be overkill, right? Overcomplication. So,
Okay.
and what do you see are the strongest practical use cases for today where GenAI is a real helper? Maybe customer support, maybe observability, or fraud detection, or DevOps, business automation. So, what are the the practical use cases that will benefit most from AI?
Oh, sure. I think definitely. I think the initial thing, or at least I've done at a consulting firm I just last year I worked on, is, for example, like within a company, you could have your financial department. They have to go through all the invoices to search for certain information. So that actually is an example of a very good usage, and also kind of proven too. So it's not like way too complicated. But I think that's the thing, we can make use of GenAI, for example, to LLMs, and to sort through, a huge stack of papers. And inside your each invoice, it's got so much details, right? And there are certain things, maybe our finance director was like looking for certain information for a monthly report, those kind of things. I think that will be an example of definitely good to kind of make use of GenAI to do, because it kind of saves a lot of time. It otherwise too, What he did was he had a clerk that was helping with scanning through, right, manually. It's kind of, oh, let me do each one, scan and search for certain types of information within that invoice, each invoice, for that same month. So you can imagine, right? It can be very tedious, especially for huge organizations. So yeah, that's kind of an example. And I think it's always good to do something, yeah, a little bit smaller in scope. That would always be good too. So I can think of that right away as an example. So
So if you consider the developer team that already has integrated event streams into their application, and
mm.
now they want to use Gen AI, what is the first step in doing that?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, they want to do that. So I think, let's say, that's a before, right? You kind of, this example is a development team already has using Kafka, let's say something,
Yeah.
right, to
Hmm.
do some streaming stuff.
Hmm.
I think I'm kind of would assume that the team is quite knowledgeable about using event streaming and using the messaging system like a publish subscribe type of system. So the sort of like infrastructure is there. But I think then, like again, with Gen AI systems and Gen AI apps, and maybe just look at it and see you can maybe make use of the same mechanism, right? For handling, I was kind of citing example, if you are doing a chat, let's say some kind of customer support within the company, maybe you could set up so then input prompts, sending prompts to your chatbot could be done, sending to you can be expecting a lot of requests, to the chatbot, and maybe you can use a message queue or like a message broke topic to receive all of these information, and then let the broker kind of distribute the request accordingly, right, to your processor, so to speak, and kind of help with the load. For example, in kind of busy time, maybe you feel you can actually make use of that. Maybe like company internal CRM system, something like that. I'm just kind of guessing. So yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah.
Okay, okay, and where does Java fit into all this architecture today? Is actually Java a good fit for Gen AI event-driven systems?
Oh, you're asking about Java, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
Java, right? Okay, yeah. I feel, yeah, as a programming language and the platform framework, Java definitely is very powerful, as such. Yeah, and where can it fit into? So I think also too with event streaming, and we already know like Kafka, something like Kafka, or even I worked with Apache Pulsar before. I think Pulsar is a little bit more complicated in a sense. It's more cloud native in nature of itself, so not as popular, but still, you could kind of like use, because these are all Java based systems too, so definitely you can kind of think of using Java for your messaging framework too, and Java is really proven too, and also such good concurrency framework, and now with virtual threads too and Java, then if there's a need, right, you can also be using techniques that's within Java to help with this type of heavy processing, so to speak, concurrency, parallel processing type of scenario to threads and things like that. So yeah, yeah, totally, yeah.
It's good that you mentioned virtual threads. So, Mary, how do virtual threads fit into event-driven systems? So, for example, the Java application uses Kafka,
Hmm.
right? And the team has migrated to Java 21. As far as I remember, that's the version where virtual threads were integrated. So,
Yeah.
can virtual threads help somehow with the performance of this application that uses Kafka?
Okay.
Uh,
Very good. Actually, excellent question. I have to say, I haven't tried virtual threads in Kafka, but I would think, you would, right? But the thing is, though, interestingly, virtual threads kind of benefits as such. So certainly, yeah, if your particular system has certain kind of usages that can call for the use of virtual threads, then you can certainly think of folding, so to speak, right? Kind of plugging that into it too. And yeah, totally. I think so. Yeah. But like I said, I have to admit I haven't tried that out. So I do not. an immediate example to say, oh, how can you use it efficiently? But again, just like anything else, may not be the right tool for the job. So you have to look into your particular usage scenario and determine if it's a proper way of, kind of an appropriate way to utilize virtual threads too. But certainly, yeah, it is there. Yeah, Java 21, and so yeah, just yeah,
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
look into that if yeah.
Yeah, that could be the idea for the next demo, like virtual threads with event streams. That would be actually would be very curious to know about the performance
Yes.
gains, if any, right?
Yeah.
And Java has evolved so much within the recent years, right? And
Yeah.
there are so many new features, foreign function memory API, or as Mayur justfully mentioned, there's the Spring AI, right? That we can
Yeah.
integrate different models into the Java application. And then there's the Embable framework, right?
Yes.
For strongly typed agentic workflows
Yeah.
on JVM, which is just amazing, right? So Java really does belong in this world of AI, right? So
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
That's how I feel too. Now, but I know too, I was actually at a conference, right, at J Creek last year, and that was amazing. Some of the amazing, who is it, Steph, oh, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I cannot remember, but he does the deep nets, right? And we started talking about too, because there is some, and of course Anna from Oracle, the DevRel team,
yeah,
she was there too. Yeah, so she also, they brought up the fact that there is some kind of like, again, I just have not had time to follow up deeply into this area, but I think they did bring up Java might have some when it gets into lower level type of processing, it has some not I shouldn't say deficiency. It's just not built for certain things that Python can do very well. For example, NumPy, right? If folks are, so I think they were feeling. I think from what I know, I recall is the Java doesn't have the NumPy um, kind of capability. So that was yeah. So that's the Python. But anyway, but otherwise too, like you brought it up. I feel yes, Java is capable and Babel and some of the virtual threads or some other things, and even with vector database, there's also the vector what is it, oh my gosh, I cannot often remember, but anyway, yeah, with vector, there's also the vector API that's been like enhanced. And also I worked for DataStax previously, and the DataStax founder, right, Jonathan Ellis too, he did the J vector. Yeah, he did that. That was the thing. So that actually helps too with speeding vector. Vector, as some of you may know, right, with vector database, with essentially a lot of LLMs, and that's what it operates on, the vectorization of all the data. So it's really super fast too, things like that. But certainly there are frameworks that are like very, very excellent capability within Java that is helping with this whole LLM, kind of a state, kind of the state of it essentially. So yeah. So that's how I feel.
yeah, yeah, cool. So Hamza has a question. So I reflect, and can you tell our learning point in our stream? So hello, Hamza, for you and for everybody who has joined us later. So me and Mary are discussing event streams and the ways of building real-time Gen AI powered systems. And friends, a small reminder, if you have any questions, right, we will be very happy to answer them. So, for example, Mayor has a question here. Please explain vector DB. So, yeah, Mary, could you please, in just a couple of words for our viewers who are not very familiar with the topic yet. So, what is the
Oh,
vector DB?
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, because I was at DataStax for a bit when it's Apache Cassandra, and they added in vector capability. So it's essentially, as we all know, right, it will get down to a bit lower level. So data, right, as such, right, with machine learning types of data, as we know, it can have multi-dimensional. Yeah. So quickly kind of describing it is, for example, right, give an example, kind of easily understandable right away would be like you can have a cat, right? Like an animal, a cat, but a cat can have different categorization to it, right? It's a feline and four legs, four-legged animal, and it's got this and that, and what is it? What other thing? Well, anyway, certain attributes to some data. So how do we efficiently store them in a database? So the traditional relational databases, you can store them, no problem. But the thing is, this more efficient is basically define your data as they are like matrix, right? It vector. I'm talking about math, the vector. What is, my gosh, vector math, right? And so essentially, then this way you can actually store your data in like the many attributes of your entity can be stored efficiently that way, and then you can apply vector matrix math to actually operate on it. So vector database is essentially allows you to save the data in vectorized format. So in other words, when you need to process your data, you have a cat or a dog, they because of machine learning, it categorizes all of the data, and then you store the data in vectorized format. And so they are essentially, if you look into a database, if I kind of cite example, they are just like an array of not integers, double, or is it double? Yeah, I'm sorry, I just haven't been dealing with that level. Just all of a sudden didn't come to me. But essentially, these are multi-dimensional data that are stored in floating point numbers. So the floating point is that's what gets translated, and how you translate your particular data and its attributes is also based on vector specifications too. So you can have different OpenAI has also vector specification too. So database essentially is what gets stored, and you're storing all of these vectorized data. So it's simply speaking, that's what it is. It's just database, but storing vectorized data. So when we're dealing with GenAI applications, you do need to, before you store it, you need to convert it to vector, vector data. And then when you extract it too, also, the database itself should have capability for you to kind of do queries, and based on ranking too, and different attributes, you can also like search based on that too. So it extends what relational database doesn't have, essentially, and allows for multidimensional data to be stored. Yeah, I hope it is clear and as to why we
Yeah,
use that.
thank you so much. And then the next question that I had in relation to that, about the vector DB and the storage. So what is the simplest useful architecture for the application that uses event streams plus GenAI? So for example, we're starting from scratch. So what would you recommend as the architecture pattern for such the application?
Oh, for an application that we want to use event stream,
Yeah.
in maybe like a multi.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think. Very good question. But are you looking for specific like architectural pattern, like such as is suggested by like composite pattern, or that type, that level? I
Mhm.
just don't have a name for that pattern. But I think too, a lot of times, right, when we're talking about agents and we're using multi-agentic type of scenario, so and I wish, but that's a very good question. Maybe because I just haven't got to that point of looking at it from formal architecture. How do you look at these patterns? But I think one thing maybe I can also say is in multi-agentic, you can think of it, we may need an orchestrator too, because now we're talking about agents, right? Each agent is specific to do certain tasks. And but in a complicated scenario, you can have multiple agents because they are each doing certain tasks specific to itself. But yet, the system as a whole, you have all these different agents, and they are all loosely coupled by itself. But there are certain processing that are happening within each one of them that needs to eventually feed into your output of your ecosystem. Let's say not even kind of like a particular output. It's just continuous system doing things. So in other words, in some ways too, then we're thinking of using an orchestrator to do it, because it's think of it like a, I like to use this example as a symphony orchestra. You can have different instruments playing different parts of the music, but you need an a conductor to be conducting, making sure the music is playing, the sequencing, how does it work, and this is a flute is playing or the violin is playing the parts, at certain times, all of these things. So likewise, the orchestrator would be that particular pattern will actually help with that essentially like all the whole processing of your whole system will be in the proper sequence, in sync with one another. All of the agents are not going to step on each other's toes. Maybe I'm processing a little too fast, but my in my output will have to wait for another agents to be ready. Then I can send it over there, and it does certain things in a data pipeline kind of situation. So you do in some sense you may want to consider using an orchestrator to help with the sequencing and
Mhm.
of all of your actions within that processing pipeline, for example. So that will be like an example of that pattern that I can think of right away.
That
So
is, yeah, that is actually a genius comparison, Mary. Thank you for
oh,
that. So,
thank you.
agent orchestration is like the orchestra playing
Yes.
music, the
Hmm.
conductor, because everybody in the orchestra has the notes, right? So everything
Yes.
is fine, and the person knows his or her part
Yes.
perfectly, right? But
Yes.
they
That's right.
all are going to play independently of each other, and it's going to be a cacophony of noises, right? It's not going to be
Exactly.
music. So the
Yeah.
conductor, in this case the orchestration system, is going
Yeah.
to just make someone not rush forward, or someone
Yeah.
not stay behind, or someone not playing louder than he or she should. And yeah, that's
Absolutely.
genius
Yeah.
comparison. Thank you for that. It's very,
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, yeah, and I had the next question, a logical question arising from that, but I will give way to our audience. They also have some
Sure.
questions,
Sure.
so let's give them the priority for me. So, Sina asks, apart from the talks you had about the useful ways of using Gen AI for work, is
Mhm.
there an area where using Gen AI could cause major problems? Do you
Mm.
have any experience with that, like in production?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, and, yeah, that's, nobody has asked that yet to me, but I think it is very true. As such, right, I think Gen AI obviously has its place in the modern society, modern computing, but it may not be, the right, solution for all kinds of situations. So now in my case, I have to admit I have been, yeah, doing a lot of presentations or talking with people and my community sharing things. So I actually have not, because of that, I haven't got time to build anything. I would like to build, but building really required the focus time. So I haven't done it. But to say that if something would like this, like Gen AI, using that would cause problem, I think
Mm-hmm.
to me, I think in real life production, I have to say from all I have heard about, a lot of times when people are all excited, it's because they are doing a lot of their personal types of applications, like we share earlier, right, Catherine, about I want to get up in the morning. I want this agent to take care of all my messages and send it to me. I don't need to look through them. That's a kind of perfect scenario. But I think it's really like when we think of production, these are like companies, doing a heavy processing, shipping operation. I haven't heard too many companies that are using a true 100% Gen AI powered kind of system. They may be using Gen AI for certain parts of their system, maybe generating a report, things like that. Not like a whole end to end. So I don't know right away to say if it's not the right thing to use, but I think definitely if you let's say banking. I think maybe I can quote an example from what I know. There are no banks that I've talked to, people working in the banks that are using Gen AI for their thing. It's because the banks are not trusting it. In fact, some banks, even in the US here, we have credit union, right? For these are different types of banking system, but they are credit union. I remember at the consulting firm, I tried to ask them, are they looking into it? They said, oh no, that was a year ago. They said we are not even allowed to touch it, Gen AI. So they are not even using it. And the reason is because we are now talking about customer kind of assets, which is their money, right, in the banking system. And so if you are relying on Gen AI, which is non-deterministic, to deal with your business, your withdrawal and kind of deposits, and that's not trusting. You shouldn't trust it, I mean, for sure, right, to use your banking kind of like debiting and kind of crediting your system. I don't think it will give you accurate results every time, even if you say, okay, I'm gonna do send a bunch of transaction over and do the calculations for me. I think it's not going to give you exact answer every time, or not, just because of its non-deterministic
Yeah.
nature. So yeah, so that for sure, don't use Gen AI to do it. Now, what it is good at, again, to look for information, right? Like an invoice, a stack of invoice thing, and even like government contracts. In fact, that's what we experiment with. Is we
Mm.
want to bid for government contract, and it's crazy. U.S. government, this 30 pages or even more, of a questionnaire, and ask you all these things, and you have to scan through them, and maybe you want to submit for multiple proposals, and they are essentially asking you the same thing. So maybe you can use generative AI to help, right? To say, okay, I don't want to fill this out, but look at this particular application I've already filled out, and use that to apply to all of the other application for the other proposals that I want to do, submit to. That type of stuff, then it might be good. But just don't use it for anything that has to deal with financial data. I think it will be
Mhm.
dangerous at this point. And the security too. Don't even forget, right? The data is not secure. If you're using agents, how can you trust the agent to be doing the proper things? That type of stuff. So yeah, I would think, yeah. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and I also just now had another example.
Hmm.
For example, a healthcare system. It's
Yeah.
also controversial, right? Should we use AI there in the healthcare or not? Because on the one hand, you get a lot of data. And the patient data,
Yeah.
for example, a heart monitoring system, for instance, right? And it
Yeah.
sends a lot of events like every minute or every 2 minutes
Sure.
um, from the sensor, and then AI might help to analyze all these data and search for some trends and maybe give some advice. That's on
Yeah.
the one hand. On the other hand,
Yeah.
again, medical stuff, it's very, very serious, right? And we're talking
Yeah.
about health, the
Yeah.
people, their well-being, and maybe risk to life. And I wouldn't want
Yeah.
to trust AI maybe with my health, right? Or with
Yeah.
my life. What do you think about that?
Sure.
So
Ah,
AI there. Yeah.
you brought a good point. I think it is very true. Yeah, the healthcare, still feel, if it's kind of something that has to deal with critical kind of decision.
Yeah.
And not only that, actually, you reminded me, we very often thought of healthcare is for maybe like some physical ailment or something. But in fact, while I'm here, oh, I'm so glad you brought it up, this healthcare topic. I should share with you, because on Mother's Day, or no, International Women's Day in March. So my AI collective, right, in Chicago, we had kind of women gathering, not just for women, but it's kind of celebrating women International
Mhm.
Day. And so one mom actually shared her story. And here's the situation. She has a son, 15, like a teenager, 15, 14 years old, and quite smart, but having autism. So
Mhm.
yeah, so there's some issue, but he was at the time to taking some medication, but then not unbeknown to the parents, right? So he was at school, and school has a computer system, they could get to chat GPT. So the kids were drawn to it, and he's apparently a smart kid too. So he was using chat GPT and asked question about his medication. But as it turns out, it got to the point that the ChatGPT's result came back to tell him, don't trust your parents because they do not know what they're doing. So no way, right? So
Yeah.
now how the mom found out, thankfully, was because there's a school monitoring. So that's why I'm saying, don't let the thing is, sometimes there are people who are vulnerable to trusting your LLM to tell you everything. Trust it like the god or something. So that's the danger, right? And then these are children, young people. So they are trusting, thinking, okay, don't trust my mom because that's what ChatGPT told me. So now the teacher who actually been monitoring found that out about the conversation. So thankfully, so the teacher was kind of concerned and notified the mom about this situation with her son using ChatGPT and getting this kind of erroneous advice, so to speak. So those are the kind of things I'm trying to say. Nothing to do, so to speak, like technical design, whatever it is, but really it's the information that get passed back, to the user consumer, but the consumer is vulnerable. Maybe they're the young people, or sometimes they're very senior people too. They could get they blindly trusting it, and then that would get them into trouble. So anyway, but back to your healthcare question. So same thing. This is involves healthcare too, and I'm just using it, not even like processing my health data, but asking question. But it could come back with the wrong answer, right? And it would kind of like this kind of moral, that things that touch on moral thing too, it is so important that we cannot rely, it's basically we have to think of the fact that consumers are now non-technical too. I mean, a lot of times we think of ourselves, we're builders, developers, we tend to have a more rational mind, right? We might look at the result and say, oh, that's wrong, but a lot of people actually trust it. So we have
Exactly.
to also take into account that aspect of the usage of this technology too. So it can be very dangerous. We need to educate, especially those who are vulnerable, right? Not to overly rely on it. So yeah, that type of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're so right. I mean, this is such a sensitive topic because yeah, we as developers we think about building a reliable system, right?
Yeah.
That prevents any breakage or has good failure modes and so on and so forth, and serves the good. But we sometimes forget about the end user and
Yeah.
the user proof, making the
Yeah.
application user proof, right? Because
That's
uh,
right.
you have rightfully mentioned, and this is the terrible story that has a happy ending happily, right?
Yeah.
But
Thankfully. Yeah.
these stories are unfortunately very very common these days, right? Because people
Yes.
trust AI,
That's
and
right.
AI gives them the information that they want to hear, right? Often, and
Yeah.
then have the
Exactly.
mental disorder that gets worse, or right, or AI giving advice that is not very
Yeah.
good for health,
No.
right? And people
Exactly.
trust that because it sounds
Yeah.
very very credible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Yeah. I even have developers telling me they were using copilots and doing things, right? And then it's like giving her guidance or something. And she started to trust it all the time, but realized sometimes it's not the right thing. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So we tend even could be fooled a little bit too, like overly relying and trusting it too. So we have to be careful using it. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But in this case, if we again, if we go back to the development mode, and the developer uses AI, right,
Yeah.
for coding,
Yeah.
and as we have just stated, right, trusting AI is not always good,
Yeah.
right, because it
Yeah.
can hallucinate, be erroneous, or give some bad advice. How does a developer that uses AI to code can actually verify whether AI tells right or wrong? So
Yeah.
does he or she uses another LLM or a senior developer?
Yeah. I
Yes.
think yes, and what you suggested are all very valid. Maybe senior developer or just a cohort of people, right? That you go around and check with other people, and yeah, and maybe do more searches, do some more research on your own, and just do not trust it right away. Is what I feel, especially when you feel, something doesn't look right. Is it true? So always do fact checking, right? And use another LLM is also they have these things called eval kind of agent too, right, to do evaluation, and use another agent to actually go check it for me, something like that, right? And just the more input you get, possibility or probability is that you should be getting a better set of advice than it is trusting that one result. I think, yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have one more question from the audience,
Sure.
from Mayur. So, why vector DB used for AI? Why not RDBMS?
Yeah, Mayur, you asked a very good question. Yes. So again, with AI, we are talking about AI storing data in multi-dimensional format. So that's why, using relational database, maybe you will, storing a cat, you need to store all of the dimensions, different aspects about the cat, in maybe 1,000 columns or thousands of columns or something, because you need to describe the cat in many different ways. It belongs to this, it belongs to that, and how much of a degree of that. So all of these, right? If you use RDBMS, it's not very efficient, and also when it gets to querying, it will even be nightmare too. So therefore, the new kind of methodology to use it is to store your data in vectorized format. As I kind of described, you need to translate your data that comes in, let's say, as cat or something, and then it essentially it also needs to go through checking the specifications too for that vector structure or whatever. So it needs to translate them into vectorized data, and then with the vectorized data, you store them into a vector database. Because then again, in vector database, when you look at the data, it's just an array of floating point numbers, because all of the different aspects are being translated into floating point. So you can see too that can be an infinite number of numbers to represent your data in their different aspects of that data. So that's why we're using vector database to do it. So yeah, I hope it's clear. Yeah, but feel free to reach out to me. We can have more conversations too. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Mary, I will post the links to your socials in the description of this event.
Sure.
So, friends, the recording will be available on YouTube. You can rewatch it, or you can watch the beginning if you came a little bit later. And you can follow Mary on her socials and ask her questions, right? If you have any. And we are slowly coming to the end of our session. I have some more questions, but they are lighter.
Yeah. Okay.
So one question is, Mary, how many years does it take to become a great expert in AI and not get obsolete in 5 minutes?
Oh, wow. How many years? Yeah. Well, I think it's really not. I feel, in this field, is so much excitement. To me, you just have to constantly be learning. Whatever, like I said, right? I got asked by people about or they brought up smart contracts. I'm like, what is it? With my 30 some years of experience, I still did not know about smart contracts, because I do not work with blockchains, right? So things like that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is there's no say as a number too, but I think always be curious, always expand, and open to learning new things is what I feel. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. And all right, friends, Mary, I have a little bit surprise for you. So this is going to be a rapid fire questionnaire. So
Okay.
I have several questions for Mary, A or B, like cats or dogs, and you answer just A or B, right? Without elaborating, just A or B,
Eight.
as you feel. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's try. Okay. Let's do that. All right.
Okay.
Java or Kotlin?
Java. Oh, 8.
Kafka. Yeah, okay, Java. All right, so that's the answer.
Yeah.
Moving on. Kafka or Pulsar?
Kafka. 8.
Kafka. Okay. AI Copilot or AI agent?
B. AI
Okay.
agent. Yeah.
Vector search or keyword search?
8. Vector search.
Okay, cool. Human in the loop or full automation?
8. Human in the loop.
Okay. Conference talk or hands-on workshop?
Ooh, good question. I'd say B. Yeah, conference workshop.
Okay. Ask the LLM or read the docs?
A. Ask the LLM.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Cats. Yeah. I like cats.
Okay. Cloud Code or Gemini CLI?
Cloud Code. A.
Okay. Dark mode or light mode?
A. Dark mode.
Okay. Prompt better or blame the model?
B. Blame the model.
Yeah, that's the spirit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mary, for this
Um,
very, very engaging talk. And
thank
we have
you.
one more question.
Oh,
All right, one more from the audience. Um, how do you prevent hallucinations in agent systems?
agency.
That's a good question.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say, right, there's a reflection pattern, it's called, and you can just essentially have the agent keep asking multiple times. I think it will reduce, eventually, it should lower the possibility of hallucination. So I'd say that's what you can do one way. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you so much, Mary.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody who attended. That was super exciting.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget to subscribe to our channel, Cyberjar. And next week, we are going to have the live stream with Bruno Borges on why you should never, ever use simply Java jar in production.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
subscribe to our channel and don't miss that. And thank you very much, Mary. That was
Thank
very
you.
cool. Yeah, it was nice seeing you.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. With that, have a nice day, everybody, or the rest of the week. Mary, you too. Also have a nice day
Thank
and the
you.
rest of the week. Yeah,
Thank
weekend. Good
you.
weekend.
Thank you.
To
Thank you, Captain.
never yeah, turn on the LLM or ChatGPT on the weekend. At the weekend, it's like no, no.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah.